Actually, I have the best job in the world because I get to talk to people, living legends. This space allows me to have these conversations and be in community with people who have done the work. People, many of you may not know, but you're gonna know. You're gonna know today, and if you don't know now, you know. People, she is a professor of American social thought and history at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also written many, many, many books. Today, I want to talk about one of her books in particular as it relates to reparations. It is My Face is Black is True, Callie House and the Struggle for Ex-Slave Reparations. Let me welcome the great Dr. Mary Frances Berry. Hi.
Hey, thank you for having me. Can you
Listen,
hear me,
Dr. Berry.
Karen?
yes, we can hear you. Hi.
Hello there, Professor Tyler Merritt, too. All
Yes.
So
right.
glad you're
So
here.
we all professors. Come on. And this is
We're
Martin's
griots.
birthday.
Yes.
And I want to sing happy birthday to you. Can I just say that much, Martin?
You said it. Yes, you may.
And Coretta would be really happy today. I spent a lot of time with her, talking to her in all those years after Martin was assassinated. And then when I gained some kind of public, what they call prominence, I don't know what Malcolm X would call it, but, and she was just so happy that they were able to get service as one of the things that we all ought to emphasize on this day. You know, she said, I know people are going to go to the malls and they're going to shop and they're going to do stuff all the day, but if we can just get embedded the idea of service. And she was really just very uptight about making sure that happened. And I think it has happened. Don't you think so?
It's mixed. I have the pleasure of sitting here every day, examining the world, disseminating information, listening, watching, talking. And I feel like, like Martin, his last book that was published posthumously, Where Do We Go From Here? I don't really know. Is it community? Is it chaos? To your point, Dr. Berry, yes, there's in this space a lot of community. In this space, there is service. In this space that we're in currently. But I feel like I'm seeing, flyers for strip clubs to honor Martin Luther King. I mean, I feel like there's no grounding or centering, and there's no blueprint for what service looks like today. You understood this. So in your book, you talk about, being a domestic worker in your early years. You spent more than 80 years on this earth. So you touched. This is why it's important, y'all. You touched a lot of moments in history in your life of service. Tell us how you're seeing it.
Well, that kind of service, yes, I did a little bit of everything. I was in an orphanage once when I was a baby, and I've done it. I've been from high and low, and I've been poor, and I've been better off. Better off is better. But anyway, I've seen the world from every kind of aspect. But what I want to say to you, when you said that last book that Martin wrote, Where Do We Go From Here, which he actually wrote, in fact, a lot of people don't write the books. They get people to, go done with so-and-so, buy, whatever. But he actually wrote the book. And what is important about it, we miss. What is important about it, and I talk about it when I go out and give talks this week and all around the world a year. Look, he became convinced that nonviolent direct action, protest, had to be involved in the mix. He believed in the right to vote. He made great speeches about the right to vote. And as again, I say, Coretta and I talked about this all the time, like where was he going? That he believed in all of that, but he knew from experience, he knew from what happened at the Democratic National Convention in 1964 when they wouldn't let Fannie Lima and the Mississippi delegation even get, there to be represented. And it was really embarrassing on national television. He knew also, look at this. This is what's really important, I think. when he and Coretta were in Boston, they didn't spend a lot of time with the poor people that we know, the poor Black community in Boston that's been there all the time. They were on campus, they were studying, and then he was courting her, and all that stuff was going on. They were reading and so on, and they got married or whatever. But when he went to New York also, and that time he was stabbed when he was on that book tour, he didn't get around in New York. He was in Harlem then, but he didn't spend. He was on a book tour. I know. I've been on book tours myself. What he did, but when he went to Chicago, one of the things that she and I talked about that he said, well, I've been all these years talking about the right to vote and how if we could just protect our vote, great speeches. We would do this and that. But he said, I was talking to a person who told me, we've been voting a long time. And don't you still see these slums and tenements, and rats and all us poor and everything else and people discriminating against us and all the stuff that happened? And it's sort of like, well, yes, the part of voting is important and we should continue, to work to get it. And so one of the things that has happened to us as a people, Callie House understood that too. The woman I wrote about in My Face is Black for True. Poor woman was a slave, all that, and started what the federal government investigators said was the largest movement of Negroes that had existed starting in 1898. 300,000 dues-paying members, 25 cents a year. Most of them didn't have 25 cents, but they paid whatever they could pay to try to get the federal government to give us some kind of reparations. In any case, that we had to add the vote to direct action. What we knew that in Montgomery, we didn't vote our way into desegregating the buses. We're not going to vote our way into getting reparations. If we sit around and think that if we vote for certain people, they're going to pass HR 40, they're going to do all this stuff because we voted. No, you have to have, and that book that you're talking about, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos Community, was part of the blueprint for the Poor People's March and for the economic struggle, which Martin Luther King added to that. And I wrote another book called History Teaches Us to Resist, which is about all the resistance and direct action and everything else that I was involved in and other people. It's not a biography, but it is biographical. As the Callie House book is not a biography, but it is biographical about my life, autobiographical. But in fact, we've got to now, I despair, because we have gotten so caught up in letting people tell us that all we need to do is vote for a certain party. I'm not going to name it. I'm an independent myself. That all we need to do is do that, and then everything's going to be all right. I remember going to meetings where people told us, if we just get Trump out of there, we'll be fine. That's all we got to do. Or if we can just get this one out of there, some local person or do whatever. And an old woman down here in Louisiana, where I'm now, told me, Ms. Williams, who's 90-something, I asked her about voting. And she said, well, you know how it is down here in Louisiana. I've been since I was a girl. They haul me to the polls, tell me where to go to the polls, and they tell me what numbers to do. The preacher comes and tells me, and I go. And when I finish, they put me in a car and take me down to the daiquiri shop. They have drive-in daiquiri shops in Louisiana where you can buy daiquiris drive-through. And they buy me a daiquiri and a pork chop sandwich and give me $5 and take me home. And she said, that's wonderful because I vote. I like to vote. But she said, those old politicians, they promise you like they're going to put a roof on the schoolhouse. They're going to put a roof on the schoolhouse. But she said, I got my $5 and I got my pork chop sandwich. I'm not advising you guys to do that. But it ain't going to tell anybody to do that. But the point was that she understood that her just voting and not doing anything else and nobody else doing anything else, that's why direct action is important. And Martin Luther King understood that. And in Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here? He gives us a blueprint. We say we don't know what we're supposed to do. He gives us a blueprint for what we are supposed to do.
This book was written by King as Dr. Berry pointed out. And 1967, he spent time in isolation. He rented a house in Jamaica and with no telephone and just his notebooks, his notepads, and his pen. And he composed this book. And it was published after he was murdered. In it, he writes about the year after the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. To your point, Dr. Berry, he says, the very people who led the charge for our freedoms were discarded by their organizations. He says, to symbolize a, quote, radical change of tactics. A year later, the white backlash had become an emotional electoral issue in California, Maryland, and elsewhere. In several southern states, men long regarded as political clowns had become governors or only narrowly missed election, their magic achieved with a witch's brew of bigotry, prejudice, half-truths, and whole lies. We think about the backlash that gave us, the backlash of Obama that gave us that carnival barker with the witch's brew of bigotry, prejudice, half-truths, and whole lies. This 1967, we fast forward, the blueprint's still the same. Our voting tends to, evoke a reaction to people who think that our vote is actually going to give us all of the things that we want, as if we got equal justice under the law. You have a law degree, you have a PhD. Your PhD is in American constitutional history from the University of Michigan. You got a JD from the University of Michigan. You went to Howard as well. HU, you got a bachelor's and a master's. You've studied all of this, Dr. Berry. Our vote alone is never going to do anything but irritate white folk in this country because they somehow think our equality is their oppression.
You should fast forward from where you went to today. In fact, what do we do? People say to me, well, Biden is a good man and we don't even care if when he speaks, he says stuff that's not on the teleprompter or whatever it is, because, and we don't care. He beat Trump. And as long as they can keep waving the flag of Trump, we're supposed to go and vote without even asking them what they're going to do for us or what they did the last time, what's going to do. That's all we got to do is wave that flag. Well, I have to tell you that it wasn't just Obama. It was after that, more recently, Black Lives Matter. What we thought we were doing with Black Lives Matter, along with the white folks and other folks who came in the coalition and everybody was going to do something about police and George Floyd and all that. We remember all that. And all the people who said they were going to do stuff and the corporations that were going to do, all these people who were going to do something. And then we told we were going to get police reform, okay? And then the campaign came. And then everybody told me we should stop. Black Lives Matter sent out a notice. And everybody said, let's stop talking about these issues. Let's just vote. If we can show them that we'll vote, and a whole lot of us will vote, we'll get police reform. If we can show them that we'll vote, we don't need to ask them for anything. Now, we don't want to make people nervous. What we'll do is just wait and show them, get out there. And all the people that I know that are in my circles, they spend all their time worrying about, can we get enough people to come to vote? And is there voter suppression? And I kept telling them that people are not suppressing the vote. In Georgia, they're going to vote like they're going out of their minds. Everybody's going to vote, but you need to go ask those people for something. Ask the people who are running, what are you going to do about police reform? And they didn't do it. And what we have had is backlash. You said backlash against the Obama thing and so on. That's all true. The big backlash came and the police became embraced, no matter what they were doing, whether they were good or bad. A lot of police are good. I've got some in my family who try to do the right thing, and other people do. But the point was that we don't want to be abused. And we had established that, and we thought we had established that. And then I get some people coming to me who've been my students at Penn, who are now in politics, saying, we need to pass something to help the police, to give them more money, to do things that happen because, there's a backlash. People are concerned about crime. And our voices have been on that. We've got backlash drowned out. You talked about politicians getting elected. Look who's the governor of Florida. Who's the governor of some of these places? What has happened in some of these states? What has happened to our local issues? What has happened to the poverty issues, the crime against us issues, the police who are still killing people issues? And what has been done about the reforms that some of these Black women mayors who've gotten in office want to make, like the mayor here in New Orleans, to the police and other things where they can't get cooperation from anybody and where the business community is not behind them. They say, well, you don't know what you're doing. We need to get somebody else. What have we done? So what has happened is every time you get progress or what looks like progress, you get backlash. The woman I wrote about, Callie House, and she had all these petitions to Congress to get us some reparations, and they ended up putting her in jail because they said she was selling us fraud, even, and that she had no chapters, that she didn't have members, she didn't have anything. They lied on her, and that it was fraud for her. Guess what the fraud was? The fraud was to be telling Black people, Negroes, that they should be organized to ask the government for reparations when you should know the government is never going to give them anything. And that's fraud. So you should be telling them they should be organizing, trying to get something. And the last point on that is a friend I know who's a big lobbyist. When I told him that, he said, doggone it, that's what I get paid to do. To go, people pay me to go and ask the government to do stuff that the government doesn't want to do. So they put her in prison for telling Black people they should organize to try to get something. Well, you get the point, right?
Dr. Berry, let me say this. Let me just say, there are individuals who are listening right now who cannot see you as you speak. And we get the privilege of being able to see you speak. Karen and I both agree we could probably just listen to you for the next 3 hours, as you have lived truth. You aren't just telling stories out of theory. You aren't just saying things out of, I think this might matter. You're talking about people in whom you have walked with, in whom you have seen, and who you have spent time with. And your years on your life look so good on you. It looks so rich. It looks so beautiful. Dr. Berry, just know, like, it's hard not to get emotional to hear you talk. And I hope that everybody who is listening on Sirius right now understands what a treat, an absolute privilege it is to have you on today. Now, with that, I want to encourage some of y'all that are listening. If you ask yourself, what can I do on this day? If you have not read the book that we're talking about by Dr. King, if you haven't read this book, I'm going to encourage you to go and get it now. Whether you go and buy it from Amazon, from your own personal bookstore, wherever it's available, if you listen to it on Audible, whatever you do, go and listen to it for a couple of reasons. Here's the first. Dr. King wrote this book, and you can tell he wrote it because it is his voice. Everything that you have seen on TV where you hear him talking, you can feel it bouncing off the pages, and you also feel it from a man who at this point has lived some time. In this book, this isn't early King where he was going, here's some things I would hope to do. At this point, he had done so many things that he was talking on the other side of this. And the way that he felt about nonviolence in this book was not only passionate, but he felt like that was gospel. The way that he fights for nonviolence in this book, if you ever have heard anybody ever say, what do you think Dr. King would do nowadays? Do you think that he would be out in the street with a gun, this, that, the other? Tells me that you do not understand this man in the end of his life. There were points where he said, I think one of my favorite lines from the book is he says, violence is the antithesis of creativity and wholeness. Dr. King said violence is the antithesis of creativity and wholeness. If you want to get an idea today on the blueprint of what we're talking about looking forward, go and get this book and listen to the words where Dr. King also truly believed that, you know, and I'm a fan, there's days where I want to say all Black everything. Like, you know, we hear that all the time now, all Black everything. Dr. King believed that we couldn't move forward if it was just us, if it wasn't including the poor, if it wasn't including the white poor, if it wasn't including all poor people. These were the words that were being poured out in this book. And as I think about him on this day, and as I hear you talk, Dr. Berry, I think about how prominent and how relevant the words from that time then are right now in what we are called to do.